Hi, everybody.
Okay.
It's us again. Sandra, Kamara, Melissa, and Kelly. We're here to talk for 712. We're talking about chapters 6, 7, and 8. And I'm just kicking us off really with broader questions for this group because I feel like I was just telling the group earlier that I am spending a lot of energy trying to think about how to keep this very exploratory so that I don't come in with the assumptions that I know I'm coming in with, which is like, I think this, I think that what I want to do in my action research is right. In my mind, the way I had lined up my cycles was that cycle one, I would do a focus group. From there, I would maybe identify a few constructs that could then be maybe possibly turned into a questionnaire that I could maybe test in cycle two, even though I know cycle two is not required. And it would just serve to validate whether students, um, in my case, that were exposed to some change making, felt certain things or experienced certain things or were influenced in certain ways. And then that would inform the design of a course that would become my core action research. But I'm stuck because I'm not yet settled on what it is I'm looking to measure more quantitatively through a survey, but I am spending a lot of time focusing on the development of questions for a focus group, which is what my cycle one is focused on. That said, I want to kick it over because I do think there are elements here, right? Of the elements that spoke most to me were I'm really big on operationalization. And I see this all the time at work when people say, like, we want to know what students are taking away from XYZ. And then you just listen, you read some of the questions and you're thinking to yourself, I'm thinking to myself, like, that's not measuring what you're seeking to understand. And so just to me, the construct of operationalization is really important. I love how he describes it, the process of translation from construct or concept to measurement. And so I'm thinking to myself, what is, I think in my pop, what is it that I am hoping students will say in this focus group when I ask them questions around how did, you know, first, did you learn what I was hoping that you were going to learn? I'm not going to say it like this, obviously, but did you get what you were supposed to get? Yes. Then the real crux of the matter is like, and so what? So how did it make you feel different? Did it make you think different? Did it impact you in any way in terms of how you're approaching school, how you're approaching your sense of self in school? So I've got like big constructs of agency and engagement and self, identity, and I just don't know where to land on it because it's just so much. So
Excuse me.
I'm just hoping that with the focus groups, it'll start to funnel things for me because that's what I need. I need for the student responses to like direct me to spaces that I'm not thinking or to just invalidate things that I feel maybe because of my own biases and assumptions that should be there. They're really not there, at least not yet. So I'm wondering for the three of you, like I know Kamara and Melissa, I'm more aware that you have set surveys that have been, I think, that are validated in other space have been validated in other spaces that you're planning to use here. So I'm curious as to what they are. If you guys can go into that a little bit more deeply, and then obviously Kelly a little bit more on yours because I know things are shifting for you.
You want to jump in, Kamara?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Sandra, thanks for opening us up. I think one thing that strikes me before I go into my instrument is you talked about how you wanted to, see the operationalization of things, right? In terms of how, how does what I'm wanting to know appear in the survey or the questionnaire, and then how do we move that forward? And in chapter 8 of Sapsford, they talk about attitude leading to intentions, which lead to behavior. And they give this example about even if a company changed customers' attitudes about coffee, did it actually result in more sales? And so I think that's a little bit of what I heard you, talking about there, right? Is how do we know that what we're measuring is actually resulting in the change or the behavior or that which we think we're driving towards? And I've been thinking a lot about that for my own pop, in that, if advancing flourishing among faculty is what I'm looking to do, how do I measure that, right? So in my early phases, I'm really just going to be looking at, did their flourishing levels change? And that's the survey that I'm going to use as a flourishing index created by Dr. Tyler Vanderweel from the Harvard Human Flourishing Program. And it's validated across 13 different countries and all sorts of different people and backgrounds. So, but the question that I still have, right, is even if in the moment, it's a self-reported survey, even if in the moment someone's flourishing is increased, how do I know if their behaviors have actually changed over time, right? Have they actually incorporated these flourishing practices? And I think part of that is, for me, an outstanding question, and a little bit of that, I'm going back to, well, I think this is just the start of what we're doing, right? So to me, that's probably the bigger question of post-doctorate. How am I going to continue to look at this maybe from a more longitudinal perspective?
Kamara, can I ask a quick question on yours? Like when you say, did their levels of flourishing change? You're talking about, again, how is flourishing defined in that survey? How is it operationalized? Is it a behavior or is it an attitude or a mindset?
It is attitudes and mindsets in the survey.
Sandra, that's a really, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I was going to ask a follow-up question that just came to me, because when you were talking about how do you know the behaviors have changed over time, one of the things that stood out to me in chapter 7, when it was talking about latent variables, it was talking about attitudes, and it said the relationship between expressed attitudes and observed behavior tends to be very loose, indicating that like the way they act in a survey, in an interview scenario with you is very different. And I mentioned theory of planned behavior, which, Sandra, I feel like an assignment in several classes back, like theory of planned behavior was something that came up. I didn't look into it very much at that point in time, but now I'm sort of curious. Have any of you heard of theory of planned behavior, or do you remember that at all from before?
Yeah, I've heard of it. And that's what Kamara was referencing too, with the intentions, right? And how we have to be aware of all the different biases that impact their responses, even in a survey. Like, even if it's a self-administered survey, just their idea of who gave them the self-administered survey, they're responding to that person, right? Even when they're doing it themselves. So there's all these ways that bias can infiltrate. I wanted to just say one thing. I thought your question to Kimara was really a great one, Sandra, because maybe that's another thing you can follow up with, right? You have this survey that's looking at mindsets and attitudes, right? That's what you said. But then if you are interested in the behavior of the flourishing, maybe that's another follow-up, right? Something to track that. So I love that. I also just wanted to mention to you, Sandra, I know you said you started off, you're looking for more exploratory, and it sounds like you have these constructs of self-efficacy and all those, what you are identifying that you want to hear more of from your students. They were talking in Sapsford about many different types of surveys, as Kelly had mentioned earlier, and including like very open-ended questions where you would have to code. So that still could fall under this research for you, to keep it very exploratory and still be considered a survey. Just something for you to, further explore. So, do you want me to, were you finished, Kamara? Do you want to keep going about your?
No, I've got one more concept, but why don't you go and I'll see where the conversation goes.
Okay. So the scales or the tools that I'm using are the head, toes, knees, shoulders revised. And that was established by Dr. Megan McClelland at Oregon State University. And it's been used all over the world. It's an assessment that takes about 6 to 8 minutes. And it's kind of like a game that I've been using on my students to practice. It's like Simon Says, but it's reversed. So it'll be like, if I say touch your head, you touch your toes. If I say touch your toes, you touch your head. And then it adds in shoulders and knees and it mixes it all up. And so it's all this inhibition control and paying attention and tracking. So it's really fun actually to watch and score the kids. And that gives them a score on their self-regulation. So I'm going to do that pre and post my intervention with mindfulness. And then similarly, pre and post, I'm doing the strengths and difficulties questionnaire, which was established by Goodman a long time ago. and there's lots of different scales for different ages. This one, he says, if you're not doing a clinical population, to just, there's like broader constructs of internalizing emotional problems, externalizing emotional problems, and prosociality. So that's just what I'm doing. And that falls under some of the constructs I'm looking at, like hyperactivity or inattention or things like that. So that's just a self-administered questionnaire. That's like a checklist for the teachers. So they fill that out pre and post. So those are the two instruments I'm using now.
So one for students and one for the teachers.
Yep.
And I guess I'll just go ahead and add what my instrument is. And as you mentioned, Sandra, the context of my job has changed. And so my POP is kind of rapidly evolving as well. Many of you have heard, I'm studying effective professional development. And what I really wanted to study, my intervention, is an effective professional development program and how it influences technology integration, like in a makerspace class. But as I'm in a new environment that's actually a little more heavily embedded in research, just last week, certain things have changed and kind of come about to influence like more specifics around what I'm measuring. And so rather than it just be effective professional development, which has been already studied a lot and has sort of been established through like many years of research, a colleague asked me, how about you focus on like something very specific, like online or hybrid, which is really what I am doing. It's not just like traditional professional development that's been studied. And there are certain aspects of like maker learning and the community that I'm in now, that it's not just about technology integration, because just like integrating technology itself is not the thing. And the instrument that I wanted to use is called TPAC. It is a survey. It's a survey of about like 50 questions. It stands for technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge. And it measures teachers' self-perceptions of technology integration related to those like domains. But it's been challenged multiple times. It was written by Kohler and Mishra, and Mishra is actually at ASU, and I'm probably going to reach out to him just to like kind of like pick his brain. But there have been a lot of sort of modifications to TPAC that have been suggested over the years. And so for me, looking at my specific community and what's actually important that I want to address are things like sustainability. So, maker technology, integrating it is one thing, staying with it and having that maker space thrive afterwards is another thing. And so it doesn't really measure something like that. And looking for something that measures that is kind of more along the lines where I want to be. Still probably going to be attitudes though, like, because that's a really important factor in my context for my POP, is what the teacher's attitudes are towards this type of teaching and learning. And so I find that is going to be something that I measure. But again, like on a scale, you can have this be, I still feel that there's going to be value in qualitative and quantitative, because quantitative is going to be that scale of, and again, following the model of the TPAC survey, it's a scaled survey. It includes both of like the 60 questions that are in it, that's fully established. It has the scale of, I feel that, very likely to do this and not likely to do this on a Likert scale of like 5 different indicators. And then there's open-ended questions about describe how you, integrate, pedagogy into your technology instruction. And then the teacher would answer a question. And then over 6, I think what's interesting though is like the coding and the pre-coding concept. So like how you have to like think about, or how I'm going to modify that question. And it is almost like you have to think about what their answer is going to be ahead of time, so you can kind of come up with your code. What, Kamara, Melissa, have you come up with some, like, even though you're using established surveys, have you done anything for your coding or come up with any sort of scale or anything for that?
I haven't, because both of mine are completely quantitative. There's no open-ended. I'm going to be doing coding when I do the semi-structured interviews after I do the final, like for the final dissertation, but I didn't think I had enough time to do all of that in this one semester. So since I had done the interviews and the coding with our reconnaissance cycle 0. I thought this time I'll go quant and then I'll do both the next time.
Yeah, I do plan at this point to have a qualitative question or two. So Kelly, that whole idea of like pre-coding that we read in Sapsford was completely new to me. I didn't do that like in cycle 0. I didn't know that was a thing. So I just coded after I got all my answers. So I do think I'm going to practice a little bit of that pre-coding in terms of trying to anticipate what some of my participants will answer and use this as an opportunity to play around with it. But yeah, I haven't done that yet. But that'll definitely be something that I'll do before I administer it. And like I said, that was a new concept to me.
You know, Sandra, just jumping back to what you were talking about, with the students, some of the things you wanted to measure, can you remind me some of the constructs? I had self-efficacy, but what else?
Well, that's part of it. I think part of it, Melissa, is that I think my biggest struggle right now is that I feel that I am trying to cover way too much ground. And my biggest challenge is to try to pick a place and just stay on it, right? And I think that comes as a result of trying in my day job, right? I'm trying to convince or persuade a lot of different constituents to see the value in this for different things. So I'm like, if it's, for workplace development, it's the creativity and it's the da-da, or for someone else, it's the agency that they'll have. And if it's for workforce development, it's the exposure to, and it's just, I think that's what I've realized is that I'm looking at it with my work lens, and I need to, for the purposes of this doctorate, is to really focus on one sliver, and I cannot decide the sliver. And then I keep trying to work backwards, and I'm thinking, well, if my pop at the end of the day, if the main action research is to try to put this in a first year seminar course, which is basically a 1-credit class. Right. What might I think is the result of that? Like, I have to make some assumptions. What do I think is going to happen as a result of that for those students? And then just start thinking about that sliver or that slice of change, but because I still didn't, I still don't know, because there have been different dosages, right? So some students have gotten like a 2-hour workshop. Some students have taken a number of those different workshops. Some students have done like a weekend boot camp. Some students have done a little bit more. So there's no standard dosage that I could say. They've all gotten the same amount of stuff. They get all of the students that I've touched over the 5 years have gotten different elements, different components. It's like a menu. They've gotten like an appetizer and a main course, or some of them have just gotten a little dessert. Some of them got, yeah.
Are you planning on surveying all of them, over all the students over the 5 years?
No.
So who are you focusing on?
For this focus group, it'll be students that I saw last semester in the fall, and some students that I will see this spring. And then I'm doing two focus groups. One will be inviting students that were part of a co-curricular experience last fall. And then the other focus group will be the same co-curricular experience that I do this spring, but it'll be fresher. Like, because I think I'm trying to determine if, like right now, this was awesome. I loved it. It's going to change my world. But I really want to know, if you took it last semester, did it really change your world? Did you do anything different? You studied more? Did you join a group? Did you, so one construct, for instance, Melissa, is engagement. Defined by what? Engagement in school, engagement in clubs, engagement with your classes, engagement with peers. So there's I think that's definitely one. And then another one could be and I've got to look in the whole body of socio-emotional. Like there's one survey that was constructed by a group at a university that did something like take a first year seminar course and infuse it with socio-emotional, curriculum. Mm-hmm. It's not change making per se, but there's like overlap. So maybe I could borrow from that or maybe just test it. I've got to open it up and see it. I haven't seen it because I just can't, I'm not landing on the right construct yet.
That's what I think. That's what I'm hearing is like you identified. It's just so broad right now. And I think the more you narrow it down and recognize that you're not going to have all that data for all your stakeholders, right? That you're going to do one thing. And like Kamara is saying, that postdoc, maybe this is going to be an ongoing study and you're going to continue to evolve it. But that assignment that we have coming up, I think would actually be pretty perfect for you, right? It says take 2 constructs and make a Likert scale with 5 different questions to ask about those constructs, right? Using all the different approaches that we were learning in chapter 6, 7, and 8, right? Especially if you are doing attitudes, how to ask without asking directly, right? Understanding that they're going to have that performance bias and want to seek approval and all of those things. Even though I'm not using it, I was playing around with it with my kindergartners because my theoretical lens is through the cognitive and the social impact of how they learn the mindfulness. So I was asking things about self-efficacy and asking about the social. So, and then trying to make it appropriate for kindergartners. I used a Likert scale of emoji faces did watching my friends practice mindfulness helped me learn it, things like that, to see if that would have an impact. So I could see that really being helpful for you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to circle it back to you on some of this stuff.
I also wonder, Sandra, I have a similar, and I think we're probably to the point where we need to wrap up here, but I have a similar issue, right? Where my job is all advancing flourishing in the complete health ecosystem, right? So every other meeting on my calendar is a different stakeholder who's got a different angle on flourishing and a different way we should do this, right? And so I struggled with the very same things coming into this, and I just had to lean into, and for me, I chose the area that I was most passionate about and where I thought the most impact could be had. So my philosophy that if I change the mental mindset of the leaders, I change the culture of the people around them, because their shadow is big. So I don't know if, as you're thinking about all of these things and your experience over the last 5 years, my question to you would be either, number one, what are you most passionate about in that, and lean into that as the things that you pick for this, or 2, what have you already seen anecdotally that tells you, I think this might be one of the most impactful parts of changemaker education, and study that. So maybe use one of those 2 things to just really say, this is what I'm going to pick. None of all those other things are going to be part of your day job and they're going to be there. But for this, you just focus in on that one. And I don't know, maybe use one of those 2 questions to guide you to that. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, I needed some sounding board. So sorry that I took most of today.
No, I think it was a great discussion. So I think we will go ahead and wrap up here though. So I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week, and have fun with your surveys. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.